In today's video we are looking at this, the Airfix P-51D Mustang starter set as per the Dogfight doubles set with the Messerschmitt 109 F4, and that is one hell of a mouthful. There has already been a designated unboxing of this set, which should be appearing in a link at the top of the screen now, so go and check that out if you haven't already. And I've also done a build video of the 109 F4, so this is the last of the videos from this particular set, and it's also serving as something of a P-51D build-off, because I've also made the standard release and I intend to go through quite a lot of P-51Ds, so this is the second video in that, and there will be a little bit of a comparison at the end as well. If you don't already, you can subscribe and hit the notification bell to be alerted of when these videos come out, but I will create a little playlist of them and we will work out which P-51D is best in 1/72nd scale eventually. But in the meantime, let's get on with this one. This kit was first tooled and released in 2024. It has 31 parts and just one decal scheme. I've put a recommended retail price of $11.99. That is correct at time of recording for the kit on its own. This set, however, is $19.99, but of course does come with the Messerschmitt 109 and paints and things as well. First off is a little bit of a comparison with the standard range 2012 P-51D. This is the starter set. You see it's in the newer dark grey plastic, and there is no framing around the outside of the sprues, meaning parts can fall off, and in fact two of them had fallen off and were loose in the bag. By contrast, this is the 2012 tool, which is in the older lighter grey plastic, although currently would be in the dark grey one as well. But you see that it has this framing which just provides the extra security, make sure parts don't get broken off in transit as per the starter set. It also shows that they are clearly completely different tools. It's not that one's been converted from the other. The 2024 tool is genuinely designed from scratch, and it just shows you a little bit of the differences between the way that these have been laid out. But you can see here in this direct comparison that the detail is actually pretty comparable. It may just be a starter set, but it has beautifully fine recessed panel lines. One thing I've noticed with all of the recent Airfix starter sets is the way that the plastic is fed into the parts. What I mean by that is you can inject it from sort of the top and then you just sand it down there, but the parts can still touch each other, whereas here the fuselage halves have to have the nubs trimmed off and then sanded. There's not really a way of making this kit without sanding these things down, but of course you don't get a file or sanding stick or sandpaper or anything like that with the Airfix starter set, so something to bear in mind. Pretty much every part will need those nubs sanding before you can assemble anything. The interior of this one, as you can see, is mostly one piece. It's this floor, all the equipment behind the pilot, and it also drops down into the, I believe it's a radiator intake as well. And then you've got the pilot on the separate seat, and as you're going to see in a little bit, this pilot is very, very small, which, as I've decided to do with the plane with the wheels up, you will see later. Firstly then is this US Army Desert Sand, and the pilot is given an overall blobbing of this. Just brush painted with one of the brushes supplied. I should have mentioned at the beginning, actually, I do not use any of the paints in starter sets in general, but particularly not this one. The interior was then sprayed with Hataka US grey, green, whatever they call it. It's my standard colour for anything American, and in this case I airbrushed it. I wouldn't normally airbrush a starter set, at least the interior of a starter set, but I was working on multiple kits at the same time, so it made sense. And then we have the pilot. As you see there, he's been fully painted, and I am applying a blob of glue to the parachute attached to his bum. He does, however, manage to bail out at some point in the building process, but you can just see here how small the pilot is. This pilot is supposed to be, according to the box, Urban Drew, and I don't know if Urban Drew was a dwarf. If anyone does, please comment below. Did dwarves join the USAAF in the Second World War? Airfix certainly seem to think that they do. Citadel Colours contrast paint, the Bascalisanum Grey, was then used just as a wash for everything inside, just thinned with a bit of water just to add a bit of texture. It brings out some of the detail and makes it look a little less bland inside. And then we go to this picture. This is from the box. It's obviously a render, and it shows the aircraft with its undercarriage up. This feels a bit disingenuous when you consider that Airfix have moulded the fuselage with the undercarriage doors open. This was not the case in the 2012 tooling, although as a point of note, Tamiya do exactly the same thing, as in supply the kit with the undercarriage doors permanently open. However, they don't tell you in the instructions that you have the option to do the wheels up, and they don't supply you with a stand in the same way that this kit does. So it seems a bit strange. Now, I'm just eyeballing some 20 thou plastic, and I'm going to stick that in to make a little base, which I will then add some filler, as you're going to see shortly. Is this necessary? Probably not, but I would much rather have my aircraft with its wheels properly up, rather than the tail wheel seemingly jammed open for no reason. Adding the plastic card in now gives a base for the filler, which will go on when the fuselage halves are together. For now though, we need to stick the interior into the fuselage, and yes, you can really see how low that pilot's head is relative to the rest of the cockpit. And one of the problems that this actually caused me is, as I said, the pilot managed to fall out. Just so much room, so much excess space. I don't think pilots would sit in the P-51 and go, wow, I could have a party in here, but for some reason Urban Drew is. With the interior done, the plane can essentially fall together. We have the main wings in two parts, the top and the bottom, and incorporated into these parts are things like the wheel wells and the centre undercarriage leg doors, you know what I mean, the wheel well doors. They're all in one piece, as are the mounting points for the drop tanks, as you'll see later. But the wings can go on, and then the fuselage can go in the slot in the middle. There's no fit issues here. I know I'm using clamps, but that was just to make absolutely sure it stayed sturdy whilst I squeezed the fuselage halves into the wings. I don't think it's necessary. It seems to fit nicely. And when it comes to the tail surfaces, we have a very helpful quality of life design feature, which is this. It tells you L and R on the horizontal stabilizers, which is, funnily enough, left and right. And it's exactly the same with the exhausts as well, so you don't even have to look at which part number it is, you just look at the part itself and it tells you. I really like this, and I think all kits should have it, whether they're starter sets or not. I wouldn't say that you necessarily need to fit the exhausts at this stage. I know the instructions say that you should. I did. You can paint them and fit them afterwards, but I thought they were reasonable shape enough to just fit at this stage. The only accommodation that you have for wheels up, because as you can see here the instructions do offer that, is to have the main undercarriage doors over the holes, and of course ignore the tail wheel, which is clearly jammed down for some reason. Except in my case, I got out the Citadel liquid green stuff to use as filler, and just poured that into the cavity using the plastic card that I stuck in earlier as a base. This probably needed to be done 2 or 3 times, and then you can scribe a panel along for the divide between the port and starboard doors. I didn't bother with that, knowing that this aircraft was going to be on a stand and you wouldn't really notice it. My goal was just to get rid of the hole rather than to necessarily re-profile everything. And the final bit for construction is the propeller blade assembly. I don't know why I said blade, but I did. Which, as long as you only put glue in the correct place as per the instructions, you can get to spin if you're that way inclined. It does help. I did not assemble... Well, I assembled it, but I didn't glue it to the fuselage at this point. I left it until later, given that it was going to be a different colour anyway. And because I like to customise my shadow stands a little bit, I also put a load of the liquid green stuff in the starboard wing of the shadow stand to make it look more appropriate for a US aircraft. Essentially, it's going to have an Airfix logo on the port wing only, much like the aircraft on top of the stand will. Well, obviously not an Airfix logo, but you know what I mean. Much like the replacement to the tail wheel undercarriage area, I probably should have done this again. I just sanded it down, primed it black, and went, yeah, that'll do. Probably could have done with a little bit more tidying up. But either way, that stand can now be glued together and blitzed in black primer. Meanwhile, the rest of the aircraft has been primed in white, and this Vallejo Model Air medium yellow can be applied. So the yellow areas on this aircraft are around the guns and the nose area. I personally find it easier, or at the time I found it easier, to paint the yellow first, then cover it up, and then deal with the rest of the aircraft. You could do it the other way around. You could paint the aircraft, then mask the spaces, then paint white and then yellow over the top, but I didn't. This Vallejo model colour glossy black was then thinned down. The entire aircraft had by this point been primed in black. In terms of primer, I just use a rattle can. I tend to do it away from my camera setup just because rattle cans, well, they spray and stink, so I do them downstairs out the way. But the whole thing was primed in black and then this gloss black applied over the top. The stand as well received the same treatment. And the gloss black is applied because I have heard many a time that if you want to do a bare metal finish, you should apply your aluminium colour over a glossy black. So the aluminium in question is this Attacker Blue Line aluminium. Yes, it is designed for brushes, but if thinned down enough, it can go through an airbrush as well. And then this was just painted over. I could have easily put in more detail here. Now, I've never really experimented that much with bare metal finishes, and yeah, strictly speaking, I should probably polish some of the panels and get some variation going. For now, I just wanted to see what it looked like, and it is only a starter set after all, but I wanted to see what it looked like over the glossy black finish and see if there was any benefit to doing it that way as opposed to over something like a matte black. With the aluminium done, I've put a simple mask line for the olive drab. Now, I've gone for olive drab late. I think that is correct for 1944, if I remember correctly, because the US Army Air Force changed the shade of olive drab, so essentially it went from a darker one to a lighter one, something like that. But again, we're doing Attacker Blue Line just thinned. This scheme is fairly involved. It's essentially olive drab was sprayed over the bare metal, and I am doing that by eye, so I haven't masked it or anything, and I feel that these soft lines will be alright as long as you have enough airbrush control to do so. I don't really see how this is achievable without using an airbrush, because the harsh divide that you would get doesn't really reflect the aircraft being painted in the field. Obviously, this is your model, you can make it how you like. I personally wanted it to look more like the instructions, so you're going to have to airbrush it. On to the decals then. The entire aircraft has been gloss varnished. I just use a Vallejo model colour, just again thinned with some thinner, and then the decals can be applied. I don't like D-Day stripes or invasion stripes as decals. I would much rather paint them on, but here it is all one decal per side, so it's obviously designed to be as simple as possible to apply. And thankfully, they've been designed well enough that they do meet in the middle, and they do seem to work very nicely, so rather happy with that one. Also note here you can see the hole for the stand in the intake, and you can also see the slight recess in the tail wheel where I hadn't quite added enough filler. Anyway, the wing stripes, again, they're the perfect size, which is really the only way that these things can be applied. They have holes in them for the ejection ports and the drop tank mounts, and then you just have to fold it around the undercarriage leg and the yellow that was painted earlier. Being good quality decals from Cartograph means that this wasn't too big an issue, even though, as I said, I much prefer painting the stripes. With the decals done, we're on the home stretch with these two drop tanks. Again, they don't really give you an option for not having them because they've already given you the mounts. It would be a bit weird to have the aircraft with no drop tanks but the mounts, unless I guess it's returning from a mission. So I decided to add them. Besides, you pay for your plastic, you might as well use it. They're a little bit flimsy, but they go on okay. And then there is returning Urban Drew to his plane. This time I actually wanted to be able to see over the top, so I've added in these couple of bits of plastic just as a booster seat, because it is generally advisable for a pilot to see where they are flying, certainly in a Second World War era aircraft. The canopy can then be glued in. Now, the canopy doesn't need to be glued. It is designed so that it can just slot in at the front and the back and sort of clip in place. I, however, would much rather glue it, so careful application of my standard Revell contactor, and the canopy can just be pressed in place gently. You can also see at this stage that I have glued the propeller blade assembly to the fuselage with no issues. And then with just a fine paintbrush to paint the canopy and a few other touch-ups like the exhaust and things like that, and this aircraft is done. Firstly, I'm going to review the kit in its own right. Being a starter set, it's very easy to assemble. The instructions are incredibly easy to follow, and I very much appreciate that. However, the detail is not compromised, even though they've simplified quite a few bits, because they've put 31 parts in this one, or something like that, when the main release is 50-something. I don't think you'd necessarily tell from most viewing distances. So it's a pretty enjoyable build, other than the two things that really annoy me. One being, why have they put a dwarven pilot in it? And the other being, what am I supposed to do with the tail wheel? Either you remove the option to have the main undercarriage up, or you add an option to have the tail wheel up. It seems so illogical to have it this way. And especially knowing that a decade ago, Airfix got it right. Why have they just lapsed and not bothered? Surely they could have added a couple of parts and that wouldn't have ruined the kit. And also, if you're going to have it without the stand, you're going to end up with a hole in it anyway. So you might as well just do it like this. So yes, it's not too difficult to modify, but don't forget, this is designed as a starter set. You're not really supposed to be expecting people to modify it. And then the other thing I want to mention is the colour scheme. The only decal option you get in this particular release of it is the Dogfight Double. They're giving you paintbrushes and pots of paint to brush paint it, but I don't think you're ever going to do it justice by brush painting it. It's an obvious airbrush scheme, in the same way that the Messerschmitt 109F4 that they include has mottling. And you can't, I mean, okay, you can mottle with a paintbrush, but I think it's easier to mottle with an airbrush, and it's easier to paint a non-mottled aircraft if you're a beginner. So who are they marketing it towards? They've given you a starter set with a more complicated scheme. Why don't they just put this scheme as the main release, the 2012 tooling? Why wouldn't you do that and then have some of the alternative silver ones that they've done with the starter set? Surely that's the logical way of doing it. In terms of value for money then, I think if you divide it in half and you're saying that it's a tenner per kit in the set, then yeah, that's absolutely fine, although you could just buy the 2012 release for less than that, because that's a Series 1 kit. So is this worth more than the other Airfix kit? Well, that leads us to the next part of how to review this, which is by comparing it with the other Airfix P-51D Mustang in 1/72 scale. The only issues I think there really are with the 2012 tool is that some of the parts are a bit flimsy. You see here the radio antenna mast has been snapped off. That basically happened when I glued it in, and the undercarriage is also extremely flimsy. So there are a couple of parts that are very difficult to get off the sprue without cutting them, and occasionally Airfix quality control means that their parts may be warped, which I've experienced on one of my P51s before. Other than that, I don't see a problem with it. Yes, okay, it's older, it's over a decade older than the starter set one, but there's nothing wrong with it. It's not difficult to build at all. So why would you pay more for the starter set? I can't really answer that. I don't think you should. I think if you see the starter set going cheaply, then fair enough, pick it up. Otherwise, the Airfix one, I keep saying the Airfix one, you know, the main Airfix one is just better. So I understand why Airfix would want a P-51D as a starter set. You know, the Mustang is a famous aircraft. It's likely to entice some people in, and you're going to want it to be as easy to build as possible and as easy to follow the instructions as possible, and this kit definitely ticks those boxes. But when they've supplied it with a scheme that I don't think you can ever really master with just the box, and maybe I should have done that, maybe I should have done it as a true starter set challenge, but it doesn't say starter set on the box, does it? It's a gift set. So maybe I should have tried to do it with just paintbrushes, but I think if you see the end result with paintbrushes and look at the one on the box, you're probably going to be a bit underwhelmed, because yours probably isn't going to be as good. And if you just really, really want a model of this particular Mustang, well, you could just buy the Tamiya one, because spoilers, one of the schemes in there is identical, as you're going to see in a later video. So comparing it with the main tool just kind of gives the main question being, what's the point? But I suppose to be more reasonable, and I always try to be, it is your hobby. You can make it for whatever reason you want, and if you just want to make the starter set Mustang, then go for it, and if you want to introduce someone to the hobby, then go for it. If the only one available is the gift set, then yeah, might as well go for it, but I personally probably wouldn't recommend it. I did have a good time building it, but I can't see myself buying another one, to be quite honest. So what do you think? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Have you made this? Have you made the other one? Do you hate Mustangs? Because if you made it this far into the video and you don't even like Mustangs, I applaud you. I will be making another Mustang at some point. This one actually I made, I think August 2024, and it just took a very long time for me to get the video out. But I will have another P-51D shortly. I'm trying to stagger them out so that I don't flood the channel with just nothing but Mustang videos. But hey, if you want to subscribe if you haven't already, you will be notified when there is another one. And it is going to be a winner stays on type competition. So this one, didn't cut the mustard. Although why you'd be cutting mustard with a P-51, I don't know. But so far, the best one is the 2012 tool. With that in mind, all that remains is for me to thank you very much for watching, remind you to like, subscribe and hit the notification bell, and even suggest, if you really want, you could become a channel member like the people appearing on screen who contribute a small amount every month towards the channel. And also a quick apology and acknowledgement. There are a couple of new members this month. Thank you very much for joining. It is very much appreciated. Though often I do make videos in advance, so if you don't see your name at the end of a video but you have become a channel member, I apologise. You will be there next time I come to record a video. Still, with that in mind, I've got plenty of Mustangs in the stash thanks to these wonderful people. How many Mustangs? Well, I guess you're going to have to stay tuned and find out. Goodbye.